I am Ethan Caldwell, 47 years old, a financial manager living quietly in Sonoma Valley. While my wife Lillian threw a party to celebrate a $700 million inheritance, I sat by my mother Margaret Caldwell's bedside, holding her hand as she took her final breaths. My mother left everything to Lillian: the mansion, the vineyards, the wine company, and me, just an old flip phone. No letter, no explanation, just that. But when I turned it on, I didn't find closure. I found my mother's voice, and what she said could bury not only Lillian, but also names that never wanted to be spoken. So I have to ask, what would you do if the last thing your mother left you was the truth? Everyone paid to silence.
Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest video.
Sonoma Valley Hospital was eerily silent. Fluorescent lights flickered on the ceiling, casting shadows on my mother's face, now just a fragile silhouette. I sat there, holding her hand, her bony fingers cold. Her forehead was warm, but not feverish. Just the last flicker of a dying flame. I gently wiped it with a warm cloth, whispering, "I'm here, Mom," though her gaze had drifted to a place I couldn't reach. The machines beeped steadily, blending with her faint breaths, like a sad song no one wanted to hear. Outside, Sonoma Valley glowed with sunset, its golden hills shimmering like a painting. But in this room it was just me and Mom, forgotten by the world. Not far away, Caldwell Estate shone like a palace. I didn't need to be there to see it. Twinkling string lights like stars, soft jazz floating over the vineyards, and guests in silk stepping out of sleek black cars, laughing loudly. Champagne glasses sparkling before they reached the gate. Lillian, my wife, stood at the center like a queen. I pictured her in a shimmering gold dress, not just any gold, the kind that gleamed like a mirror, custom fitted. Her hair was swept up regally, her heels clicking like punctuation on the stone floor. Every eye was on her as she raised her glass, her voice ringing out, "To legacy, mine at last." Not once did she mention my mother. Not once did she glance toward the hospital where I sat, holding the hand of the woman who gave her everything. My mother left Lillian everything. The grand mansion overlooking the valley, miles of sprawling vineyards, and the Caldwell Wine Company, the family's symbol. I didn't expect to share. I was never one to fight for it. But when the nurse walked in and handed me a small white box, her eyes full of meaning, I felt a deep cut inside. She said, "This was for you," the nurse said softly, then left, leaving me with the box in a heavy silence. I opened the box, my hands trembling slightly. Inside was an ancient flip phone, the kind with a rubber keypad and a tiny scratched-up screen, like it had lived through a decade. On it, a sticky note with my mother's shaky handwriting. "For my son only," no letter, no explanation. Just that. I let out a dry, bitter laugh. After everything, nights I stayed by her side. Days Lillian was busy with parties and deals. I got a piece of junk no one would pick up from a landfill. I looked at my mother, now sunk into an eternal sleep, and wondered, is this all she thought of me? I recalled a distant afternoon, when I was a boy, and my mother led me through the Caldwell vineyards, pointing to the vines and saying, "Truth is always enduring. Ethan, like these roots." Her words echoed in me, but now, sitting in the cold hospital room, I felt only betrayal. Lillian had taken everything, and my mother, who I thought would always be fair, left me with a useless trinket. I returned to my small apartment, where the walls seemed to close in on me. Sonoma Valley outside my window was still beautiful, its hills glowing gold under the moonlight, but it was no longer home. I took out the phone, flipping it over in my hands. It felt heavier than it should, as if it held something bigger than itself. I found an old charger in a drawer, plugged it in, and sat there staring at the dark screen. I expected nothing, maybe just a meaningless keepsake. But then a sharp ting sounded, small but piercing, cutting through the silent kitchen. The screen lit up, a folder appeared, labeled, "Only Son." Below it a line, "They've erased you." My heart pounded. I touched the folder with a trembling finger. My mother's voice came through, faint but clear, as if she were sitting beside me. "Don't let them sign, Ethan," she said, her voice quivering from some final place. "It's not over, never over." The recording stopped, leaving me in a silence heavier than before. I pressed replay, but it wouldn't play again. Only my heartbeat thumped in my chest. What did she know? Who were they? Lillian? The lawyers? Or bigger names, lurking behind the glamour of Caldwell estate? I looked out the window, where moonlight bathed the distant vineyards. Lillian was still there, laughing, as if my mother never existed. But this phone, though old, was what she left me. And I wondered if the last thing she left was a truth everyone paid to hide. What would I do? I had no answer, but as I gripped the phone, I felt a small flame ignite. Not hope, but a promise from her, and from myself. I didn't plan to go to the party at Caldwell Estate. The crumpled invitation lay in my bag, but a part of me, perhaps weakness, urged me to go. I wanted to say something, even just a few words, about my mother, the woman who gave Lillian everything. But stepping into the mansion, I realized I'd made a mistake. Lillian didn't want me there, and she made sure I knew it. Caldwell Estate was dazzling, like a lavish dream. Strings of lights twinkled over the entrance, casting glows on the distant vineyards. Soft jazz mingled with the raucous laughter of guests in silken suits, their champagne glasses gleaming. I moved toward the podium, my heart heavy. I just wanted to say a few words about my mother, her walks through the vineyards, her smile bright as sunlight. But when Lillian saw me, her smile vanished, like a curtain dropping. She approached, her voice low but sharp. "You shouldn't be here, Ethan. Not tonight." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just want to speak about Mom. 1 minute." Lillian leaned in, her voice sweet as sugar but sharp as a knife. "Mom left you what you deserved." Silence. She turned away, not looking back, as if I were just a ghost. I stood there, stunned. The crowd didn't hear her, but it didn't matter. Her words clung to me like a stain. I stepped toward the microphone, hoping to reclaim something, but the MC hesitated, eyes darting to Lillian. She didn't waver. 2 security guards appeared from nowhere, flanking me like I was a threat. "I'm her son," I said, louder than intended, my voice echoing in the hall. Lillian, without turning, said coldly, "Not tonight." They escorted me out, past tables of curious glances and hushed murmurs. A woman, vaguely familiar from my mother's book club, looked at me as if I were a story she hadn't finished. Outside, the air was colder than I expected. My breath formed white clouds. The silence hit harder than any of Lillian's words. I drove back to my apartment, my mind blank, only the sound of her heels echoing in my head. I recalled 18 years of marriage to Lillian. At first, we loved fiercely. She was the flame, I was the shadow. But over time, she grew controlling, dismissive, while my mother tried to mediate, though her health faded. "Ethan, you've always been the patient one," she said once, as we walked the vineyards. Now, patience wasn't enough. This phone, though old, was what she left me. And I wondered, if this was the truth someone wanted buried, what would I do? I sat in the dark kitchen, my mother's old flip phone glowing like a small flame in the night. Her recording, "Don't let them sign, Ethan. It's not over," echoed in my mind, a puzzle without an answer. Lillian had erased me from my mother's legacy. But somehow, my mother had left this phone like a door to the truth. I knew I had to dig deeper, even if it meant facing Lillian and her powerful world. But as I touched the screen, opening the Only Son folder, I didn't expect the truth to be bigger than I imagined. The folder held a new audio file. I pressed play, my heart pounding. My mother's voice, faint but clear, came through. "Check clause 17C. Ethan." I changed it. "Lillian doesn't know." The recording stopped, leaving me in suffocating silence. Clause 17C. What was that? I tried other files, but a prompt appeared. Enter password. I tried my mother's birthday, mine, our old address, nothing. I tried lavender, her favorite flower, but the screen just blinked, refusing. I leaned back, the phone warming in my hand, feeling both frustrated and determined. Another file caught my eye. A string of numbers, coordinates, pointing to Willow Creek Bank, a small town bank. I remembered my mother mentioning it, but she hadn't gone there in years. The next morning, I drove through Sonoma Valley's winding roads, vineyards sparkling in the early light. Willow Creek Bank appeared, an old building with a sticky glass door, and a worn wooden counter. I showed the coordinates to the clerk, an older woman with curious eyes. She disappeared into the back, returning with a small metal box. "Mrs. Caldwell said this was for you," she said softly. I opened the box in a private room, my heart racing. Inside was a USB drive, wrapped in a pale purple handkerchief, still faintly scented with my mother's perfume. With it was an envelope, my name in her shaky handwriting. I opened it, my eyes stinging as I read. "Ethan, I should have spoken louder. I should have protected you more. This is the only way I could leave the truth." She wrote that she'd revised the will, adding Clause 17C to split the estate between me and Lillian. But someone, she didn't say who, hid it. I clutched the letter, tears falling silently. She knew. She tried to protect me. I returned to my apartment, the USB and letter in my pocket, my mind reeling. Did Lillian know about this will? Did she hide it on purpose? Before I could think further, the doorbell rang. 2 men stood on the porch, one thin, one hefty, both in crisp suits, holding briefcases and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Mr. Caldwell," the thin one asked, offering an envelope. "We're from Carter and Lowe, representing Mrs. Lillian. May we come in?" I let them in, though my gut said this wasn't good news. They sat at the kitchen table, documents already open, pens neatly placed. The hefty one spoke, his voice flat. "This is a standard release of claims. The will is clear. Mrs. Lillian is the sole beneficiary. This prevents future issues." I looked at them, my voice calm but firm. "I haven't read the will." The thin one nodded, as if expecting it. "Of course, but the terms are set. This is for a clean resolution." Resolution. The word felt hollow, like the nurse's words when my mother passed. I skimmed the document, pausing at a small line. "The revised estate plan from the most recent date is deemed void." "Revised?" I asked. "What revision?" They exchanged a quick glance. The thin one said, "An old version, not actionable." I pushed the papers back. "I'm not signing." They chuckled, not kindly. The hefty one said, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I stood. "We're done." They left, leaving me with a hunted feeling. My phone buzzed moments later. Lillian. I let it ring twice, then answered. Her voice was sweet, dangerous. "Ethan, I heard the lawyers stopped by." I said, "They did." She sighed, like I was a stubborn child. "No need to make things messy. Just stay quiet, like you always do." I didn't reply. Her voice dropped. "Don't make it worse." Then she hung up. I sat in my apartment, my mother's flip phone glowing like a beacon in the storm. The letter from her, and the USB from Willow Creek Bank, confirmed Clause 17C, splitting the estate evenly. But Lillian and her lawyers were doing everything to bury it. I knew I had to find more evidence, even if it meant facing Lillian's entire powerful world. But when I opened the phone again, I didn't expect the truth to lead me to someone I hadn't considered. To Raymond Holt. I scrolled through the phone's menus, my hands trembling as I searched for more clues. A new audio file appeared, labeled, "Recording 424, Witness." I pressed play, my heart pounding. My mother's voice, weak but resolute, came through. "If you find this, go to Raymond Holt. He knows." He saw me sign. The recording stopped, leaving me in suffocating silence. Raymond Holt, my mother's brother-in-law, who once managed the Caldwell family's books before Lillian took over. I remembered him, a quiet man, always standing in the corner at family gatherings, hands clasped tightly as if hiding something. I thought he was just shy. Now I wasn't so sure. I drove to Raymond's house, a small wooden cabin on the outskirts of Sonoma Valley, where wild rose bushes grew untamed and tangled wind chimes no longer rang. The gravel crunched under my tires, echoing my heartbeat. I knocked, each rap heavy. Raymond opened the door, slower than I recalled, his hair grayer, his eyes flashing as if I were a ghost from the past. "Ethan," he said, his voice hoarse. "I need to talk about Mom," I replied, holding up the phone. He didn't invite me in, just stepped aside, letting me figure it out. Inside, his house smelled of old paper and menthol. We sat at a dining table, cluttered with unopened mail and crossword books. I played the recording, letting him hear my mother's voice. Raymond saw me sighing. He didn't deny it. "She asked me to witness," he whispered, eyes downcast. She said it mattered. I pressed him, and did it matter? He nodded slowly. She said Lillian pressured her, that lawyers showed up before she could think clearly. She wanted a copy, something no one could touch. I clenched my fists. Mom trusted you. He trembled slightly, his voice breaking. I know. Then why didn't you say anything when they announced that will? I asked, my voice sharper than intended. He rubbed his temples. You think I didn't want to? I was going to. But then Lillian's team showed up. A guy, Daryl from the law firm, said keeping things quiet was better for everyone. That your mom changed her mind again. I stared at him. Did she change her mind? He bowed his head. No, I don't think so. The silence between us felt like a judgment. Raymond stood, walked to the hallway, and returned with a yellow envelope. He placed it before me. I kept this, just in case. I opened it, my hands shaking. Inside was a copy of my mother's envelope, dated, sealed, addressed to her, marked personal. I looked at him. Because you knew this wasn't right. He didn't answer. I leaned forward. You were there, Raymond. You saw her sign, and when they erased her voice, you stayed silent. He closed his eyes. I thought they'd honor her another way. I didn't think they'd cut you out completely. I gave a bitter laugh. Didn't think Lillian would cut me out. She's been doing it since I married her. Like the Raymond aged before my eyes. His face etched deeper than time alone could manage. Guilt, maybe. I'll testify, he said, his voice firmer. If it goes to court, I'll say she signed, and I was there. I asked, why now? Because I found the documents, or because you can't sleep anymore? He looked at me, his eyes full of something I couldn't read. Because you asked, and because I can't lie anymore. I didn't forgive him, but I nodded, in acknowledgement. As I stood to leave, he called after me. One condition, if this goes public, keep my name out. My wife's sick, she doesn't know any of this. I nodded again. If you keep your word, I'll protect your family. I drove back, Raymond's envelope in my pocket, my mind reeling. Sonoma Valley outside my window was picturesque, but I saw only darkness. Stepping into my apartment, I found a sleek envelope slid under the door. No stamp, no return address, just my name typed neatly. I opened it, my heart sinking. A single page, cease and desist. The document demanded I cease all inquiries, or defamatory insinuations regarding the estate of Margaret Caldwell, or Lillian Caldwell's inheritance rights. Signed by Carter and Lowe, the law firm backing Lillian at the gala. My phone buzzed. Lillian. I let it ring, then answered. Her voice was honeyed but cold. Ethan, I heard the lawyers stopped by. I said, they did. She sighed, like I was a defiant child. No need to make things messy. Just stay quiet, like you always do. I stayed silent, her voice lowered. Don't make it worse, Ethan. You don't know when to stop. She hung up. Lillian and her lawyers had hidden the revised will, erasing me from my mother's legacy. The cease and desist, letter and Lillian's threat. Just stay quiet, like you always do, only fueled my resolve. My mother had left me this truth, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. To bring it to light, I needed an ally, someone who could amplify her voice. That's when I thought of Susan Harper. Susan was an old friend of my mother's, an investigative journalist, who once wrote for the Sonoma Chronicle. I remembered times my mother invited her over. The two of them sitting in the vineyard, laughing about stories the world wasn't ready to hear. If anyone could help me, it was Susan. I texted her, I have something you need to hear. It's real and bigger than me. 20 minutes later, she replied, meet me tonight. We arranged to meet at a bookstore cafe on the edge of town, where jazz drowned out questions and no one noticed two people in a corner. The cafe was dim, the scent of old books blending with coffee. Susan, her hair grayer than I recalled, but her eyes still sharp as knives, sat across from me. Without preamble, I handed her the USB. This is everything, I said. She plugged it into her laptop, earbuds in, silent. When my mother's recording played, check clause 17C. Lillian doesn't know, her brows furrowed. She listened on, to the part where my mother mentioned 2 senators on the Caldwell Wine Company's donor list. Susan leaned back, her voice low. You know this doesn't just take down Lillian, right? It could topple 5 people in Washington. I looked her in the eye, my voice steady, then let the light bring them all down. Susan nodded, her fingers tapping swiftly on the keyboard. By sunset, her team had built a short video. No frills, just the truth. The revised will's copy, my mother's recordings, and a photo of Raymond's signature. The voiceover was my mother's, raw, sometimes halting, but unmistakable. The title, signed under sedation. The billion-dollar inheritance scandal. Susan hit publish, and the internet did the rest. The post started in small forums, estate law groups, then exploded. By midnight, dozens of local journalists shared it. By morning, #Caldwell Clause 17C was trending nationwide. I sat on the living room floor, laptop open, watching the shares skyrocket. They didn't name me at first, just the forgotten son, or the disputed heir. But the voice in the recording was my mother's, clear as day. They made me sign while I was sedated. I wrapped myself in the sweater I wore sitting by her in the hospital, feeling her presence guiding me. But the pride didn't last. Lillian struck back faster than I expected. She appeared on TV in a navy dress, eyes glistening just enough for the camera to catch. "My husband Ethan has always been troubled," she said, pausing to underscore the pain. "I've tried to be patient, to care for him, but this is a vicious smear campaign against me. Our family, and everything my mother built." I watched on the screen, my hands clenched. She was good, too good, like she'd rehearsed her whole life for this moment. Then the pressure came, not just from Lillian. My phone buzzed with a text from the company's HR director. "Meet me at 11 private." An email attached screenshots, old notes from a resolved coworker dispute, twisted out of context, and an anonymous blog post. Ethan Caldwell, the forgotten husband with a dangerous imagination. The post's photo was me at my mother's funeral. Eyes red and swollen, captioned unstable, sources say yes. I almost laughed, but my throat caught. Lillian had orchestrated it all, swift and clean. At the office, my director, Karen, looked uneasy. "Ethan, we've received some information, unverified, but concerning," she said, fumbling with phrases like company image and conduct standards. I nodded, standing. "You want me on leave?" She didn't answer directly, but her sigh said enough. I left, no arguing, no tears, but sitting in my car, under the shade of an old maple, I felt something shift. Not the car, but me. Back home, I opened my mother's flip phone, seeking comfort. A new file appeared, labeled, Recording 426, List. I pressed play, my heart racing. My mother's voice, weak but sharp. "It's not just Lillian, check the donor list. 2 senators, they knew Clause 17C was hidden." I gripped the phone, my breath quickening. She knew the truth scale. It wasn't just Lillian, but a network of power. I remembered her words in the vineyard when I was a boy. "Truth is like a vine, Ethan. It endures, even when buried deep." I couldn't sleep that night. Lillian had backed me into a corner, but my mother had given me a weapon. I opened my laptop, contacting Laura, the private attorney I'd hired the previous week. "We need to sue," I said, my voice stronger than ever. "Not just for me, but for Mom." Laura nodded over the screen. "You're not after money. You're after your mother's wishes being honored. That's bigger." I nodded, feeling the fire in my chest burn brighter. Lillian might control the media, but I had the truth, and I wouldn't stay silent anymore. I stood before the Sonoma Valley courthouse doors, my mother's flip phone in my pocket like a talisman. The past weeks, I'd uncovered the truth. Lillian and her legal team tried to bury the revised will with Clause 17C, my mother's recordings, and Raymond Holt's testimony. Susan Harper's video, with #Caldwell Clause 17C trending across the web, had made my story a focal point. Lillian fought back, calling me the troubled husband, and pushing me into work trouble, but my mother left one final weapon. Her voice ringing from that old phone, guiding me to today. I wasn't seeking money. I was seeking my mother's wishes. The Sonoma Valley courthouse smelled of old paper and polished wood. I stepped inside, palms sweaty, clutching an envelope with evidence, the will's copy, the USB, and Raymond's notes. The clerk looked at me, her voice flat. "You're the one tied to the Caldwell case." I nodded. "I'm here to submit a petition to amend the will." She opened the envelope, scanned the documents, then called the judge's assistant. I was ushered into the courtroom. No crowds or cameras, just echoing footsteps, in the stern gaze of the judge, a woman about 60, silver-haired with an uncompromising voice. "You're Ethan Caldwell?" she asked, peering over her glasses. "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. She motioned me to sit. "You have audio evidence?" I handed over the flip phone, now like a sacred relic. It had carried pain, then proof, and now justice. The judge pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room, weak but clear. "I was coerced. My children must know the truth. My final will is at the bank. I never voided it." No one spoke. The silence that followed was heavy, as if the room held its breath. The judge looked at me. "And this will, it's notarized?" I nodded. "Yes, and there's a witness. He's ready to testify." I thought of Raymond, who'd promised to step up, though with his name kept out. The judge nodded, her voice calm. "I order a full review of the will under the California Probate Code. Asset distribution will be frozen until completion." My knees nearly buckled as I left the room. I'd done it, not for money, but for Mom. I didn't go home right away. I sat in the car, engine off, staring at the courthouse steps. My phone lit up with news alerts. New evidence in billion-dollar estate dispute. Margaret Caldwell's final will may have been ignored. Susan was live streaming from the courthouse, her voice sharp but calm, amplifying my mother's truth. Lillian, meanwhile, canceled her TV interview. Her spokesperson issued a no comment and resigned that same night. I declined every interview request. I didn't need the spotlight. At home I opened my laptop, reading comments under Susan's post. Some called me a hero, others a troublemaker. I wrapped myself in the sweater I wore, sitting by my mother, feeling her presence guiding me. Then the flip phone buzzed, not mine, but my mother's. It lit up on the table, as if summoned. A new folder appeared, for when the time comes. I opened it, hands trembling. A single audio file, Caldwell will reading, notarized. I pressed play. The old lawyer's voice, dry but clear. "This is the reading of the amended will, notarized on the most recent date. Directing inheritance as follows." He read clearly, no mistake. Ethan, the only son. The silence I'd carried for so long shattered, slowly but completely. Then a text came, just 2 words, "Meet privately." No signature, but I knew it was Lillian. Her voice on TV, her slanders, and the pressure she put on my job, still echoed. But now, she wanted to meet. I texted back, named the place and time. I wasn't scared anymore. Not quite. My mother had given me the truth, and I'd carry it wherever Lillian wanted to face me. I drove to Caldwell Estate. The Caldwell Estate vineyards appeared under the sunset, rows of vines curving like waves, dry leaves rustling in the cold breeze. I parked at the edge of the property, where the land sloped down and Sonoma Valley stretched for miles. Lillian stood there, near the last row of vines, her coat wrapped tight, arms crossed. She didn't smile. Her eyes were cold, but weary, as if the glamour of Caldwell Estate had faded. "So," she said, her voice flat, "the quiet husband finally screamed." I stepped forward, keeping my distance. "I didn't scream," I replied, my voice calm, but firm. "I just stopped whispering." She let out a dry laugh, a sound sharp like breaking glass. "You always had the smallest voice, Ethan. But now the whole world hears you." I looked straight at her, unflinching. "They're not hearing me. They're hearing Mom. You silenced her." I just pressed play. My words hit her. Her jaw tightened. Her fingers trembled, as if she wanted to slap someone. But she knew it was pointless. "I was supposed to be the one she trusted," she said, her voice lower, almost a whisper. "I was the one with access." I shook my head. Having access and being trustworthy are 2 different things. We stood there, among the vines my mother loved, 2 strangers divided by a truth she left behind. I remembered the early days of our marriage, when Lillian and I laughed together in this vineyard, my mother watching with a gentle smile. "You 2 must lift each other up," she'd said. But Lillian only lifted herself. She'd manipulated my mother, forced her to sign the wrong will when she was at her weakest, and now she stood here, trying to justify it. You think this changes anything? She asked, her voice cold again, as if she still held power. I replied, slowly, no, it just reveals everything. Lillian looked out at the valley, where the sunset burned red, like blood. I did it to protect the wine company, she said, as if that was reason enough. Mom wasn't lucid enough to decide. I was just helping her. I stepped closer, my voice sharp. Helping? You forced her to sign while she was sedated. You erased me from the will, from the family. She didn't answer, just clenched her hands, nails digging into her palms. I continued. I'm not fighting for money, Lillian, I'm fighting for Mom. She turned back, her eyes flashing a moment of pain, quickly hidden. You think Mom wanted this? A lawsuit, a scandal. I shook my head. Mom wanted the truth. She didn't fight loudly, but she fought her way, through this phone, through me. Lillian said nothing more. She turned away, walking through the vines, her figure fading into the sunset. No goodbye. I stood alone, the cold breeze blowing through, carrying the scent of earth and ripe grapes. I remembered my mother's words, from a distant afternoon, when we planted trees in the vineyard. Truth doesn't need to be loud, Ethan, she said, hands caked with dirt, her smile radiant. It just needs someone to bring it to light. Now standing among her vines, I felt her presence, as if she were beside me, guiding me. I didn't need Lillian's forgiveness or acknowledgement. I just needed Mom to know I'd done right. I didn't want that money. $700 million couldn't replace my mother, but I wanted to use it to honor her, though I didn't yet know how. Maybe an organization, a place to protect people like her, like me, pushed into the shadows by power and ambition. I walked back to the car, the sunset fading behind me. Sonoma Valley stretched before me, beautiful and serene, like a promise that everything would be okay. I gripped the phone, feeling the fire in my heart, no longer a faint spark, but a steady light, like the vines my mother loved. Lillian may have taken the legacy, but I took back my mother's voice, and my own. I stood in the early sunlight of Sonoma Valley, looking at the freshly painted building before me. Once an old cafe. The glossy sign read, Margaret Caldwell Center for Family Legal Aid. The Margaret Caldwell Center for Family Legal Aid sat on a quiet street, its new glass doors gleaming in the sunlight, inside filled with bookshelves of legal documents and tidy desks. I stepped in, the air tinged with fresh paint and printer paper. A small team of volunteers, all believers in this mission, moved between desks, organizing files and hanging bulletin boards. On the reception counter, a handwritten note read, She never asked, she never took, but she never left. That was my mother, and I wanted this center to carry her spirit. The opening was quiet, no press, no cameras, just people who truly cared. Susan Harper, the journalist who helped me bring the truth to light, stood in the corner, holding 2 cups of tea, a subtle smile on her face. Raymond Holt, who testified for my mother's will, was there too, quietly nodding to me from afar. I didn't need thanks from him. His standing up was enough. Laura, my lawyer, approached, patting my shoulder. You did it, Ethan, she said. Not just for your mom, but for everyone who needs this place. I nodded, my throat tight, not from sadness, but from a feeling I'd never known. Being seen. I remembered days with my mother in the Caldwell estate vineyards, when she taught me about vines and truth. They're enduring, Ethan, she said, hands caked with dirt, her smile radiant. Even when buried deep, they rise. Now this center was how I brought her truth to light, not with shouts, but with quiet action, like she did with the phone. I thought of Lillian, how she tried to bury the revised will, her slanders on TV. She could keep the glamour of Caldwell Estate, but I kept my mother's legacy. One measured not in money, but in justice. I stepped into a back room, where a bookshelf held stacks of legal documents. On the top shelf, I placed a small wooden box, plain but clean and simple. Inside was my mother's flip phone, its screen scratched, its keypad worn. I set it beside a photo of her in a gardening hat, cheeks smudged with dirt, her smile as bright as Sonoma Valley's sunshine. I stood there touching the box, feeling her here, not as a ghost, but as a lasting light. "I did it, Mom," I whispered, and for the first time I didn't feel alone. I walked to the hallway, where Susan was chatting with a staff member about the center's first case, a family cut from a will through legal tricks. I listened, a sense of purpose rising in me. This was what my mother wanted, a place for people like her, like me, to have a voice. I thought of my journey, from nights by her in the hospital, humiliated by Lillian at the gala, to days investigating with the phone, and the trial where her voice filled the room. Each step was a promise I kept to her. I returned to the main room, where a plaque bearing my mother's name glowed under the light. I was no longer the quiet Ethan, the invisible husband bowing to Lillian. I was Ethan Caldwell, Margaret Caldwell's only son, who brought the truth to light. I looked out at Sonoma Valley, through the window, vines curving like waves, and felt peace. My mother never asked, never took, but never left. And now, neither did I. I was no longer the quiet one. I was seen. The story of Ethan Caldwell and my wife celebrated a $700 million inheritance. While Mom was dying, all I got was a phone. I turned it on. Reflects real issues in today's U.S. society, like inheritance disputes, family inequality, and the struggle to find a personal voice amid powerful pressures. Ethan, a 47-year-old man in Sonoma Valley, was erased from his mother Margaret's estate by his wife Lillian, left only with a flip phone, holding the truth about a revised will, Clause 17C. His journey from humiliation at the Caldwell Estate Gala, investigating through Willow Creek Bank, to legal victory, and founding the Margaret Caldwell Center for Family Legal Aid, shows the power of persistence and honesty in a society where money and influence often overshadow justice. Details like his mother's recordings, Raymond Holt's testimony, and the viral video with #Caldwell Clause 17C highlight how technology and social media can amplify truth, a common phenomenon in the U.S. with movements like #MeToo or #Justice4. In U.S. culture, where individuals are often encouraged to speak out for justice, Ethan's story teaches us that truth, though hidden, is worth fighting for, especially against family or societal wrongs. Be persistent like Ethan when he refused to sign the release, despite Lillian's threats. Use technology, like he used the phone, in Susan's blog, to document evidence and share your story. Don't fear seeking allies, like Susan or Raymond, as community can be strength. Finally, like the Margaret Caldwell Center, turn personal pain into meaningful action to help others. Even in the U.S. where power often dominates, honesty and purpose, as Ethan learned, can make you seen and leave a lasting legacy. Please subscribe to follow the journey of seeking justice and truth, like Ethan did for his mom. Thank you for joining us. See you in the next video from Sonoma Valley.